And the list of features goes on and on and on, and it's like, what do I actually need for food photography? Hey guys, I'm Lauren. Welcome back to That Sage, where we talk all about food photography to help you build the creative career you want. Today, we are going to be talking all about cameras and which camera can suit you best for food photography. Now, I am not going to be telling you which brand or model to buy because there really is no such thing as the best camera, and things change so fast these days that it is impossible to keep up. So instead, what I'm going to be doing is talking you through the list of features to look out for in a camera that are really going to help you specifically with food photography. Bear in mind when it comes to any kind of photography that your lenses are going to have a far bigger impact on the look of your final photo than any camera body will. So make sure you check out my video on how to choose your lenses for food photography, and let's jump in. Okay, so full frame versus crop sensor. This is a question I get all the time, and the truth is, it doesn't really matter that much. If you're a pro photographer, then you're going to want to be shooting on a full frame. But if you're new to photography, you're a beginner, or you just want to run a food blog, then a crop sensor is not going to hold you back. What's really important if you go with a crop sensor camera is understanding the impact that this will have on your lenses. So that's something that I talk about all in my lenses video, so make sure you go check that out. Going for a crop sensor camera is a great way to save a bit of budget in the beginning, but if you know you're going to upgrade later and your lenses might not be transferable to your new camera, so it's worth thinking about whether you want to start with a full frame and keep your lenses, or start with a crop frame and a basic lens and upgrade everything later. Okay, let's talk about megapixels. Now, it is no secret that camera companies love to tell you about how many megapixels their camera has in order to try and make you buy it. So when we see adverts for cameras with 24 megapixels, 40 megapixels, 50 megapixels, you think, wow, I should definitely have 50 megapixels. So let's see if you really do. So a megapixel equals 1 million pixels, and how many megapixels you need in your camera really depends on what you want to do with your final images. For displaying photos on the web, which let's face it is probably what most of us want to do most of the time, then you just need to make sure that your pixel resolution is big enough to accommodate for where you're displaying your pictures. So for example, if you want to have a full width photo on your food blog, in your blog post, then you just need to make sure that your photo is the same width as your content area. So if your content area is 800 pixels, then you need to make sure that your final photo is at least 800 pixels wide. And this really isn't a problem for like the vast majority of cameras. So it's not really web usage that we need to think about too much when it comes to megapixels. But for printing, we need to be able to produce photos that are 300 dpi, so dots per inch, at the size that our final photo will be used. So if we want to print a photo in a cookbook that's 8 by 10 inches, then we need to make sure that our file is big enough that we can produce 300 dots per inch at 8 by 10 inches. And that actual size to print at 300 dpi in 8 by 10 inches works out as 8 megapixels. So you can see that you do not need a 50 megapixel camera in order to be printing great photos. You just need to make sure that your camera is capable of producing 300 dpi files at the size that you want to print at. And I've linked you a handy table down below so you can have a look and make sure that the camera you choose is going to accommodate your needs. Okay, so let's talk about RAW files. So a RAW file is essentially a digital negative. A JPEG is already partially processed inside your camera, so it carries its own limitations. you're not going to be able to edit a JPEG as efficiently, so you're not really going to be able to take advantage of the full capabilities of your camera sensor. When you edit a JPEG, it's what we call destructive editing. So every time you make an edit, you lose a little bit of information from the file, and your file gradually gets to be a lower and lower quality. But this doesn't happen with RAW files. So if you're not shooting in RAW, then make sure you flick that setting over on your camera and start shooting in RAW today. Okay, focus peaking is a super useful setting for food photography, especially when you're working in manual focus, which I do most of the time. Focus peaking allows me to see exactly which part of my image is in focus, so I'm not relying on my eyes to guess. And if you don't have perfect vision like me, my eyes are -16 for any of you eye people out there who knows what that means. Basically, my eyes suck. So having the ability to see exactly where my plane of focus is lying is really helpful for getting tack sharp images. But with all that being said, autofocus can also be your friend, especially if you have enough scope within that setting. So depending on your camera, you might have anywhere between 9 and 51 autofocus points, and you can select which ones you want to use in your camera's menu. So when you're choosing a camera, make sure you look at how many autofocus points it has. If your camera only has 9, then you're probably going to be struggling to nail down your focus on exactly the point you want. So for food photography, I really recommend getting a camera that has a lot of focus points so that you can just select that focus point and nail it every single time. Another thing that manufacturers will often boast is that their cameras come with an ISO range of 100 to 125,000, and that's amazing. But you really don't need that for food photography. At least I certainly hope you don't. When I'm shooting in my studio, 90% of the time my camera is nailed down on a tripod, so my ISO lives at 100, and that is the best way to get the highest quality noise-free images. But when I'm shooting handheld in the studio, I won't really stray outside of the range of 100 to 400 because I know that on my camera, this produces images that are acceptably sharp and don't have any visible noise. If I'm shooting outside in the evening, so say I have a client shoot that requires me to be shooting outside and the light is actually really dim, then I might need to push my ISO a little bit more, but I will never ever go beyond 2000, because if I'm having to push it that far, I know that I'm going to get a lot of visible grain in my images, and I would much rather just start bringing in some artificial lights to get the images that I need. So in terms of ISO range, it's great if a camera has a big one, but you're not really going to use it. So if you're paying extra just to have an ISO of 125,000, then you can probably look for a different camera and save a bit of money. So let's talk about continuous shooting modes, which is something that I use all the time in food photography. So when I want to capture an action, say like a hand pouring some syrup over a stack of pancakes, I will flick my camera over into continuous shooting mode and hold down the shutter throughout my action so that at the end I can pick the best photo of the bunch without relying on me taking one photo at the perfect moment and guaranteeing that I'm capturing that action in the best way. But within this setting, each camera will have its own continuous frames per second range, and it really depends on your camera as to how many photos it will take per second. Now I know my camera, which is the Sony a7 III, has a frames per second rate of 10 photos. So for every second that I hold down the shutter, I'm gonna get 10 photos of my action. Whereas the Canon 5D Mark IV has an FPS rate of 7 frames per second. So for every second you hold down the shutter on that camera, you're gonna get 7 options. So it really depends what you think, but personally, I would rather have more photos to choose from than less. Okay, so those are the core functions that I look for when choosing a camera for food photography. But let's talk about a few other features that are also really important. And the first one is the ability to tether. Tethering is where you connect your camera to your laptop so that you get a larger live preview of your photo on your screen, and you can also remotely control your camera. I pretty much exclusively shoot like this now because I don't have to be bending or stretching or doing anything weird to get to my camera, and it really allows me to fine-tune my scenes. Especially when I'm shooting with clients, I also have a nice live preview to show them, and everyone on set really appreciates that. All the major brands will allow you to tether, so Canon, Nikon, Sony, they all have free tethering softwares that you can use, but there are also some paid options should you be interested in that. The next nice to have is a flip out screen. Now, with the caveat that I tether most of the time, so this wasn't a deal breaker to me. The Sony cameras, well, at least my Sony a7 III, the flip out screen is useless. Like, it goes upwards and out a bit, but it doesn't actually flip out, so it's completely useless to me for food photography, but I'm tethering most of the time, so it doesn't matter. Whereas my old Canon 80D had a screen that would flip out and rotate, which was just a really nice feature to have, especially if you're shooting overhead shots and you're not tethering. The next thing that is really nice to have is a touch screen. So when you start getting into photography and you really want to be doing things quickly and changing settings, it's really nice to just be able to go like boop, 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 and have what you need. So again, the Sony, it sort of has a half functionality. I can touch my screen to choose a focus point, which is amazing, but I can't navigate the menus using touchscreen, which is a bit of a shame, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. So a touchscreen, nice to have, but not essential. The next thing that I like is easy to navigate menus. So every manufacturer will have their own menu system, and over time you'll get to know it and you'll be super quick at changing things. So just really get to know the menu system in your camera. And the last thing that I really like to look for in a camera is how many buttons am I able to customize? So as you shoot more and more, you're going to find the settings that you want to change over and over and over again. And having a few buttons that you can pre-program to change just those settings is going to make your whole process a lot quicker and a lot more comfortable. So make sure that you've got at least 2, but I like to have 4. So those are my top tips on things to look out for when you're choosing a camera for food photography. Don't forget to check out my video on choosing your lenses specifically for food photography, and I will see you next time. Bye.